Welcome back to Reviews with Elaine, because I have opinions. And today's opinions will be about From Here to Eternity by Caitlin Doughty. Look, it's the rarity for my channel, a non-fiction book. But other than the fact it's non-fiction, which I will admit I don't read much of, this is pretty much right in my wheelhouse. We've got death, we've got anthropology, and we've got tourism. So From Here to Eternity is a book examining the way various wildly different countries deal with death, human remains, and the rituals surrounding mourning. We visit such wide-ranging places as Indonesia, Bolivia, Japan, Spain, and North Carolina, and we read about examples of cremation, burial, composting, and mummification. We see rituals that are short, some that are long, that vary from pretty hands-off when it comes to the mourners, to like incredibly hands-on when it comes to family involvement. We meet death professionals of all sorts, some secular, some religious, some innovative, some very conservative, and some rituals are going to feel pretty familiar to a modern American reader, and some will feel very foreign. But the through line of the entire book is an examination of how the rituals around death and mourning help or hinder the process of grief and with the living people's comfort with their own mortality. And I really like this book. I found it touching and funny and informative and thoughtful and entertaining. It's a really easy read. Like, I kept picking it up expecting to read a page or two before I did something else, and then suddenly I'd realize that I'd read like 70 pages in like 2 hours. Most of the chapters I could get through in maybe 30 minutes at the absolute most. And yes, part of that is there are pictures, which, you know, just makes it easier to get through the book when there's a lot more, you know, room taken up with pretty pictures. But also, the little kid inside of me just always assumes that pictures just are innately more fun and quick to read and make it more enjoyable. So yes, I do enjoy a book with pictures. But part of its readability is the voice of the book. Now, I do want to start by saying I've been watching Caitlin Doughty on YouTube for literally years. I think I've seen every video on her channel, Ask a Mortician, at least 3 times. Like, that's one of the channels that I'll put on as I'm sleeping, because I find her voice just soothing enough that I can sleep to it. And yeah, I was instinctively hearing her voice narrating this book for me. But I do think her voice would have been pretty strong in this book, even if I hadn't watched enough of her videos to sing along whenever Bintham's head shows up. But there are enough asides, footnotes, and little personal thoughts to make it feel like you are listening to someone tell you a story, rather than reading a, you know, cold, analytical, nonfiction book. And I love that in nonfiction. I love learning, I love pure information, but without a story to follow and characters to get attached to, I find myself getting super distracted really quickly. Like, most nonfiction books take me forever to get through just because I stop reading a lot. And this book does have, like, the, like, sheer information, like, there are a lot of facts in here, but it also has through-line stories, and it has characters. There is not much of an overarching story throughout the entire book. It's just Caitlin traveling the world to explore death rituals, but each chapter has a clearly set up story of her time in a specific place, and like her following the journey of learning about the rituals. And we also have both Caitlin as a distinct character as well as her guides in each culture. So she takes the time to humanize all these different people and to give us just enough to see them as characters and not just a name on a page. And that both lets us see the humanity of the rituals that they are introducing her to, but also to give us someone to care about in this place and, you know, fun people to watch in our heads as we're watching the dialogue break down. It basically makes it into a bit more of a story and less of just facts. I wouldn't go so far as to call this narrative nonfiction, but there is enough to keep someone who is very story-oriented into the story. But I also just love the tone the book has. It's pretty light and playful, with our attention drawn to the ridiculous and the humorous at least several times a chapter, but it never feels like it's belittling or demeaning the people or the cultures involved. And it really takes the time to acknowledge and highlight the real emotions of mourning, loss, and the fear that surrounds death. I found myself literally crying in one chapter. The chapter based around Mexico, there's a story of someone who lost a pregnancy and how the rituals of the Day of the Dead really helped her and helped her mourn and helped her feel more comfortable with herself and helped her, accept the mourning as part of her life. Other moments felt really life-affirming or reassuring. This book really does handle sensitive topics, in my opinion, very, very well. But what I always look to when deciding if I think a nonfiction book was successful is, what is this book's thesis? Does it argue its point well, thoroughly and fully, or does it make big logical jumps, present flawed evidence, and just assume your agreement? And I would say that this book did a great job of presenting its thesis. Like, it doesn't shy away from just directly stating what it is about, which I really like. I don't feel like thesis statements in books need to be hidden. There's no need to be subtle about this shit. And this book is just an argument that we need to reassess the traditional American funeral to make room for mourners to directly confront death. It calls for rituals built around direct contact with the remains to help us come to terms with the reality of our own death, to allow us to directly face the fact that the mortal remains are no longer like our loved ones. They're just shells that used to hold our loved ones, and that therefore our loved ones are gone, and to allow us to feel that we have taken care of our loved ones one last time. And all of this is really well argued. Each place we visit and each ritual we see shows us another way in which a culture can provide these connections. And we see how the people involved are helped by them, healed by them, how it settles them more into life, and how it makes them more comfortable with death. This book does also take the time to directly compare these rituals to what happen in funerals in the US, and to talk about what the author feels is lacking in these US funerals. Now, having watched a lot of Ask a Mortician videos, I already expected to see at least some dunking on the corporate culture around American funerals, and specifically just the incredible, capitalist nature of American funeral industry. But I think she made some really solid arguments here about why it's harmful beyond the just it costs too damn much money. And I think that is one thing that, one thing that really helps with this argument is the fact that she is openly willing to acknowledge what a few of the big corporations are getting right in other countries. The feeling of grandeur, the length of visitation, the glass that provides transparency even though it does not provide direct contact, the assumption about the inclusion of family, all these are things that are highlighted as positives in our time in the ultra-modern corporate funeral homes that she visits in Japan and Spain. And she takes the time to show us how these more connected, more involved way of conducting death rituals can be implemented in the more antiseptic funeral culture of the US. I also love the fact that she took the time to show us examples of how the US funeral and death culture is evolving, some big changes that are coming, and some of them I know from the time that she wrote this book to now have evolved significantly further just from following things on YouTube and TikTok. And these moments in particular really lean into another one of the main arguments that this book is presenting. The fact that not everyone mourns the same way, and that having more options in what kind of rituals we want around death will allow more people to mourn the way that works for them. Even in the cultures that Caitlin seems to be most lauding and appreciating and showing us as beacons on the hill, even in these moments, she still shows us the little moments of people who are less interested in participating, and who seem to be getting less out of the rituals. Like, she shows that this is not a universal thing. Some people will find one thing helpful, some people will find other things helpful, though overarchingly she does believe that, people actually handling the body and having more direct contact with the body is a positive. But yeah, overall, I think this book argues its points really well. It also touches on a lot of other themes that I really expected, having known Ask a Mortician and known Caitlin Doughty's, brand, for lack of a better word, online. Things like the agency and bodily autonomy that she promotes in Death, the environmental impact of death, the warring desire of being remembered versus the desire to let our remains disappear into nothingness, feminism and how the patriarchy has separated women in particular from the rituals of death, capitalism, of course, and religion and the power of belief. These are all major themes that, like, I know from her videos are very much important to the way she sees the funeral industry, and therefore I was expecting them in here, and I think they're really well handled in here. Like, we're not going in depth in most of this stuff. Most of this is just passing comments about it. It's not the major theme of the work, but the moments that she gives us little bits of information that tie into this feel like they really work. They're really evocative, they're really strong, and they clearly make her point. But yeah, this is just a great book for me. It's really well written, it's fun, and well argued. I think it's very thought-provoking and fun to read. It's a quick read, as mentioned. The illustrations are great. It's just basically exactly what I was hoping for in this book. And I don't really have much more to say about it, other than it's good, it does its job, it's educational. Read it if you want a chance to think about how our culture deals with death.